Hello, my team is Emily Soto, Ivana Miranda, Olimpia Gomez, Mariana Mota, and me, Isis Flores, and we're going to talk about the 90s.
The musical era of the 1990s was one filled with a variety of pop, rap, and alternative music artists, as well as a plethora of one-hit wonders. It was a time when musical taste was as varied as the events that were happening at the time. Unlike most other eras, the nation of 90s music is hard to pin down. Oddball and elected, the decade defies easy categorization of this cross-pollination of sounds that left a boundary-breaking legacy that remains today. Few of the 90s most famous and incredible artists are Mariah Carey, Madonna, Janet Jackson, Elton John, Whitney Houston, and there are so much more. They had very famous albums and many hits in those years. We get to enjoy their awesome music nowadays and enjoy it as much as many people did in the 90s.
Fashion in the 90s was defined by a return to minimalist fashion. One notable shift was the mainstream adoption of tattoos, body piercings aside from ear piercing, and to a much lesser extent, other forms of body modification such as branding. One of the most popular early 90s looks was grunge. It entered mainstream fashion in 1992 when grunge bands like Nirvana, Pearl Jam, and Soundgarden rose to popularity. This look included darker color plate flannel shirts, a stone watch or ripped jeans, Doc Martens, combat boots, Birkenstocks, and high-top sneakers. Today, the 90s live on once more. Fashion's proclivity for looking back has recently turned the decade into one of its more fruitful sources of inspiration, giving us a renewed appreciation for Champion sweatshirts, Birkenstocks, and Nirvana tees. On the runways, brands like Saint Laurent, Off-White, Gucci, and Prada Goring have rediscovered the era's biggest trends, from the grunge to velvet, silky, pastel sleeves, and biker shorts.
In the 90s, a great leap to digital cinema took place. Technological advances caused filmmakers to expand their creativity and start using digital techniques never used before. Terminator 2 went out in 1991 by James Cameron, had advances in the use of morphing and a large number of special effects. Jurassic Park in 1993, these visual effects of the film were amazing. These movies spelled the end of the most handcrafted visual effects. Forrest Gump went out in 1994, showed the possibilities that new technologies were also going to bring to the more classic cinema. Toy Story 1995 was the first animated film created entirely on a computer, and The Matrix in 1999. The film had most of the filming done in Chrome Studios, then the sets were added digitally. It had important audiovisual advances for both cinema and advertising.
Literature. The 1990s was a slippery old decade to define. Concentrated between the Cold War and the War on Terror, no global conflicts to speak of, and no economic doom to wallow in. These books that are set in the 1990s examine everything from a small town life to British aristocracy, and from pop culture to serious social issues. The 1990s are largely remembered as a decade of prosperity in the United States and relative peace abroad. The economy was growing quickly, the unemployment rate was low, and the U.S. budget had a surplus for the first time in 30 years. But the 90s also put a national spotlight on many of the issues that we're still grappling with today, including terrorism, mass shootings, and climate change. New technology in the 1990s led to a rise in multiculturalism and alternative media.
The 1990s was a decade of tremendous social, political, and economic change. In 1991, the market crashed spectacularly. Galleries around the globe started shutting down their doors due to bankruptcy. Prices of pieces plummeted by more than 50% of their original worth, and investors simply stopped putting in so much cash into the scene. The 1990s were plagued with a side of the moment. There were many other aspects that shape and define what the current period will treat as artistic expression. For starters, topics such as race, sexuality, and multicolorism were hotly debating in the 90s, providing a unique, creative battlefield for all those who feeling brave enough to express themselves in such roasting hot themes. Another aspect that influenced the artists of this decade was the appearance of technological advances. There were some who questioned the validity of digital creation, especially in the early stages of the 90s, but this method eventually transferred activities such as painting, drawing, sculpture, and sound into approachable and manageable techniques.